Welcome to from Unprovable to Undeniable, how CMOs finally crack the ROI code. I'm Marie Bahl. I'm the CMO of Uptempo. I've been a marketing leader for the better part of 20 years. I've been working in technology. I've managed budgets that range from 1 to 2 million to 50 plus million globally. The role of the CMO today in this age of AI has never been more visible and, quite frankly, more vulnerable. We're expected to drive growth, prove ROI to the CFO and the board, and lead the organization through this unbelievable transformation that we're going through all at the same time. We support both brand and demand, and the complexity by which that's delivered is growing exponentially. But most of us are still not operating with a clean, unified view. We like to call it at Uptempo a command center of what we're producing in real time, how it's working, whether what we've predicted is successfully being executed or not. And that's the problem I want to dig into with our guest today, Lisa Cole. Lisa Cole is the Chief Marketing, Product, and AI Officer at 2X, where B2B go-to-marketing leaders scale without skyrocketing costs. She's a four-time CMO, having led marketing at Huron, Faro Technologies, and Celebrate. Is that it? Did I say that right?
It is. Yeah.
And she's also the author of three books. Lisa is involved in everything: Brand Gravity, The Revenue Ramp, and most recently, I just finished this, The Limitless CMO, which is the backbone of what we're going to talk about today. So
Th-
welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Look, I've been excited about this conversation for some time, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to have this. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I just kind of put it out there that this job feels virtually impossible right now. So from your perspective, what's going on?
Well, we're getting pressure, an unreasonable amount of pressure from all different sides, right? We have the
Yeah.
non-marketers of the world that don't necessarily understand the complexity of what's happening, hearing all this narrative around AI and how we no longer really need humans. We could just use the AI to do the marketing. And so we have that. At the same time, AI is kind of changing how we buy things, right? All the research evaluation that's influencing it, which if we didn't have a complex job enough with enough channels that we needed to master, with enough members of the buying committee that we needed to reach and influence, now, of course, now we have to think about both humans and machines. And so
Yeah.
that surface area that we had to cover is just actually continuously expanding. So the combination of that just kind of, we call it the marketing resource paradox, the do more with less thing. I don't think it's ever been this strong. Been on the
Yeah.
block. You and I have talked about this,
Yeah.
2 decades, and it's probably the most difficult time for a marketing leader ever. Now, lots of opportunity, but anyways,
Yeah, well, I love the do more with less because usually that recommendation is coming from somebody who absolutely has no idea what we do anyway, right?
correct.
So,
Yeah,
and I think that, we have a little bit to blame as a constituency as well, right?
right.
It is the complexity that we manage is vast, and I think everybody who is in marketing understands that complexity. I think there's something on the order of 15,000 point solutions and technology that are supporting marketing. So in our spare time, we're also systems integrators trying to glean information from all of that. But when we get these recommendations from the Sam Altmans of the world or the CEOs or CFOs, they don't really
Yeah,
understand what they're asking, right? Do more with less. And why don't you delve deeper and tell me how you'd like me to do more with less? They lose traction at that point. So it's kind of
yeah.
I was talking to one CMO one time, and she said she was so frustrated that she said to her CEO, "I'll just be coloring in the corner." Because in some cases, right, I think
Oh,
they think that
oh,
we are picking fonts and colors, and when really we're managing an unbelievable amount of complexity, and we don't have systems of record that actually give us the insider intelligence to be able to make decisions in real time, which is a little insane given it's 2026 and now we're deploying AI on top of it. So we've been dealing with, analytics that actually doesn't live inside of systems that we work with. It actually sits separately. The biggest analytics model that marketers use is marketing mix modeling, and it is a model that runs twice a year. Name me another part of the organization that runs that way.
Yeah, no, we don't always help ourselves either. But when I think about my experience, the first part of my career, I worked for as a CMO advisor for marketing services firms that help CMOs, right?
Yeah.
And in that, having all the exposure to these industry leaders, they all wanted to go on the hook for a number. They didn't realize the complexity of the technology, the integrations, the data. You can even do the important work and drive impact, but then it gets incrementally harder to prove impact.
That's right.
I thought it would be easier if I moved to the brand side. I'll just drive this transfer. This has got to be easier than advising all these companies. One of the things I've learned through that transition is marketing is the oftentimes the most overworked, overburdened, underappreciated um, functions that you might see in an organization.
Yeah,
I think every function could probably say that HR, IT, our peers. But the difference is nobody's actually walking into the office of the CFO or the CHRO and saying, I think you should be thinking differently about how we manage our expenses or calculate our customer, acquisition cost. Everyone has an opinion on what they think good marketing looks like.
yeah.
It's fascinating. So,
I
um,
mean, listen, if somebody asked me, what do you think finance does? Write down the five bullets of the things that I could do it, right? I could say it's AP, it's, month end close, it's contracts, it's billing, right? I could go through that list. I don't know that anybody can go through that list on our behalf. I think if I
yeah,
asked our HR lead or the head of finance to tell me exactly what programs we're running, they wouldn't be able to. And so, and often when we've explained that to them, you kind of see their eyes glaze over as you go through the complexity of the stuff that we're managing. And I think for
yeah,
a long time we got away with, you know what, they'll stop asking when we start performing. So we just start kicking that performance into high gear,
yeah,
the leads start flowing and everybody goes, that's great. Give them another 8% of revenue for the year. We're going to run with it. And by the way, that's an indicator. The fact that the budgets we're given have been largely stagnant between 8 and call it 12 or 15%, and in some
right,
cases larger if there's growth, uh, mostly because we can't prove that value. We can't close loop. And so,
yeah,
in the age where technology started to take over and we started getting more and more what I would call proxy indicators,
right,
click-throughs, open rates, impressions, share of voice, we're trying to shove those proxy indicators up to a C-suite that could care less about
yeah.
those details. They're
Yeah.
like, I gave you 8%. What's the return on that investment?
Yeah. We don't help ourselves. While I certainly talked a little bit about how we're underappreciated as a function and how the complexity is worse, oftentimes I don't think we help ourselves, right? When we
No.
show up in budgeting and strategic planning, annual operating planning conversations, the two things that happen is we bring the metrics of, our vanity metrics into that conversation.
Yep.
Not going to fly. The other
Nope.
thing is when it comes time to talk about if this is what we need to achieve as an organization, immediately and without fail, the marketing leaders tend to, okay, well, I need X percent more headcount. Like the way
Mm,
we show up is rather than thinking about and managing our functions like a business, like what should I be investing my resources in service of that? What are the things I need to stop doing? What are the things I need to slow down? What are the things I should prioritize or lean in and add on? We just keep showing
yeah.
up like, I need more. Like,
Well,
okay,
when you don't have visibility and you can't hone in on the
correct.
places where you think you need to affect change, all you're relying on is scale. And I've seen that in large brands much more than kind of call it medium to lower brands who they
Yeah,
don't have the luxury of kind of extensive budgets or the ability to kind of just ask for more. They have to
yeah,
be a little bit more creative. But you're absolutely right. The operational piece of this is then broken. You can't
yeah,
just keep adding humans to this thing. And by the way, the perception then from the rest of the leaders in the organization is, my God, all they do is throw money and humans at this thing. And that's fair, right? It's
yeah.
fair.
It is. It is.
But the
The
but the
operating
break
model. I
Yeah.
think, that operating model was true for the last couple decades.
Yep.
And you and I had this conversation. We're like, well, maybe it was always broken, but it's especially not going to fly now. Not when
It's
you've got
not
the
going to
Sam
fly now.
Altman saying marketing can just be done by the AI. You get the non-marketer saying you don't need headcount, just use AI. You should be able to scale, right? Like you should be able to double or
Yeah.
triple or 10x your impact
Yeah.
without any more resources, right?
Yeah.
It,
Well, and
it's
that's
that.
why I make the distinction also between brand and demand, right?
Yeah,
Because there
yeah,
are long tail brand programs that we execute for all boats rise in a tide. And then
yeah,
there's this demand side that has to be by its nature more financially driven and more explainable in traditional financial acumen. We keep
yeah,
trying to explain it in proxy indicators, and that just is not going to work. So you've got to get to the place where you can bring those models out of MMM science project land with the PhDs and extend that across a robust backbone. So we're moving into kind of talking about what the solutions are now versus kind of painting the pretty picture of the problem that we've just done. From my
yeah,
perspective, if you don't have a backbone where you can reconcile your data set, buy it, build it, acquire it, find it, do something. That's what we do for large brands today. And on
yeah,
top of that, this is kind of traditional enterprise software speak, and you have to do this if you're going to move into AI. On that backbone, you've got to be deploying analytics that can interpret the different data sets that are coming in. It doesn't equally weight brand with performance. So that's thing one. I know you've got
yeah.
an organizational attack on that.
Yeah, well, the way I look at it, it's by the way, it's consistent and aligned with yours.
Yeah.
My point of view here is that marketing should be run much like a professional services business. So, my first three CMO gigs or my first marketing leadership gigs, the very first two things I did was I needed to know what work the team was actually doing, right? So I needed visibility to where marketing resources, budget, headcount, tech, what was it actually focused on?
Hmm.
And then the second piece was how does that work actually get done? I needed visibility of those two things, right?
Yeah.
So the first would, obviously Hive9, Uptempo, that capability gave me the visibility right out of the gate. Now I know how we're investing and how it's performing, the collective return on that marketing plan, that collective return on the marketing budget. I could also dig into and question, well, how does that work actually get done? How long does it take us to get into market? Wow, it takes us 127 days to get a campaign into market. When were we expected to have that campaign in market? When was it expected to have an impact? What are the things that are doing well? What are the sacred cows that suck that I probably should stop? And, right, those are the decisions that I needed right out of the gate because you cannot improve marketing's impact on the business until you get a
Yep.
handle of those things. Now, once you get visibility, and you find out what your teams focus on, you find out what your budget dollars are allocated and how they're managed and how their time's managed,
Hmm.
then you can actually dig in and say, okay, what are the things we should stop doing? What are the things we should start? Um, why are we managing some of this work in-house? Why are we not leveraging various forms of outsourcing? And if you have that command, it gets much easier to figure out where you can apply AI to. Even if
That
it's surfacing insights from the data that you've invested in, that's the critical piece. It's that visibility across both where your resources are in, but also how the stuff gets done. Now,
And you just keyed off two really important things related to AI, right? AI is not best used to create six-finger videos and content that you've read 19 times over that uses M dashes, which they've now stolen. I love my M dash. It's now a
my
tell for
favorite
AI,
t-shirt.
right? That's
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
best use of AI for marketing. The best use of AI for marketing is first as an interpretation layer for the data that you've got, an ability to query that in a way that gives you ready insights and the ability to respond to basic questions from your C-suite. The
Right.
next is organizationally, right? Are there agentic opportunities inside your execution layer that you could automate, that you could just give to an AI agent? You can't make any of those decisions, which is why everybody's targeting content, it's the surface layer piece, it's the easiest place to kind of throw it. It's also, in my personal opinion, and I'm also the mother of an animator, that the place we
Yeah.
want to, the thing we want to preserve, our creativity, our strategic prowess, our creative design, the brand experts, the ability to write effectively, all of those things are the humanity I think we want to keep in marketing.
Yeah, yeah. I think, look, I think we can apply AI to a number of challenges. Um, it can be used creatively, but it shouldn't be replacing the human. It should be
That's right.
taking the human's strengths and turning them into superpowers.
That's
So
right.
I believe strong. So if you are a strong designer, or let's say you are yeah, seriously talented from a video standpoint, instead of taking a whole quarter to pull together assets or a video that, and then taking that and repurposing a number of assets, you can apply it, but it doesn't take away the original thought. It doesn't take
That's
away the
right.
talent. Anyway, so I
Well,
100%
creators have to
agree.
embrace that. We're going to go off on a separate tangent here for a second, but I
Yeah,
agree. Tell my daughter all the time, you can become an owner of your creativity by
yeah,
making sure that you own that IP, and people need to start thinking that way, and you can scale
yeah.
more effectively. I just told you we're relaunching a brand. Stay tuned. May 13th, I think is the day that we're relaunching a brand, and we were able to rapidly kind of go through a creative process with the same designers that we know and love, but in a
Right.
much more efficient way. So there are a lot of ways, but there's the rest of the world, back to the ones who don't understand what we do. They're like, oh, well, we can apply that to all the writing that you do and all the designing that you do. And that's, I think, missing the mark. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. Now taking your assets that you're creating, you see things like the rise of the content engineer. Well, basically, you have to take these assets that you invested money. That is your unique point of view. That's your smart and helpful
yes,
content you put out in the world that does differentiate you from all the other noise. But now you have to think about, is it findable, understandable, and will it be chosen by both humans and machines? And
that's
that's where
right.
AI can help you figure out how best to do that at scale. It doesn't
That's
take the
right.
original human out of that loop. It needs to be in there for sure.
That's right. Absolutely. I 100% agree. So you've seen this across companies of varying maturity, right?
Yeah.
Um, we talked about the proxy indicators. What do you think is the real reason that teams struggle to get to ROI? My perspective, I'll just share real quickly, is I actually don't think they prioritize it because it's been such an elusive and an evasive target that they kind of go, oh, it's too hard to get to. So let me defer to kind of silos. What's your perspective on that?
Oh, well, look, at the end of the day, ROI, underneath it, you need attribution. One of the ways I see marketers shoot themselves in the foot, and I'm certain my sales team is listening to this webinar now as we speak, it's the way they position the usage of it starts right out of the gate with, I'm taking credit for the thing. And then
Mm,
by design, anything that that marketer puts forward is then called into question because the way they even present the data, right? So they have
yeah,
to start with, well, what are the things I'm going to attribute credit to and how I approach it? If they start the whole conversation with, I'm taking credit for these things, you wouldn't have gotten this without us.
yeah, yeah,
Sales, I think if you start and frame that conversation with the whole go-to-market function around, I use attribution to make smarter decisions. If I make smarter decisions, it helps you sell more faster. Are you cool with that? Let me share with you the underlying model that I use to attribute credit to these investments. Here's how I'm thinking about it. If you start the conversation there, you get alignment, then you can backtrack to it. The second thing I think I see often, one, they're not actually prioritizing connecting the dots. Like they're not
mm,
putting the energy into setting up the infrastructure, the plumbing that would
yeah,
enable them to actually track the influence of all these investments. You see these data points of it takes 1,100 plus touches for an enterprise sale around a complex solution over a 3 to 11 month time frame. Okay, have you invested in like your plumbing to make sure that you can track and then monitor the influence and impact of all those touch points on your ability to get the deal and close it faster?
yeah.
Um,
I'm
Usually, if
sure.
you talk to a marketer, They rarely have a good command of how much swivel chair syndrome exists within their own tech stack. They have all the
Yeah.
tools though. We love buying shiny things, but we don't actually invest in the plumbing. And that's the second piece, which then leads to the third. I also believe marketers have a really hard time connecting the dots so that how these investments work together.
So you just described a complex operation,
Yeah,
essentially, right?
yeah, it's
So
it's
could you imagine that the inventory system or the operations for a manufacturing company would not have an ERP that would be able to track all of the widgets they built and the process that's going through? You would never ask someone to deliver an actual product without that underpinning, and yet that's what we do. And I'm sure my
yeah,
sales team is listening too as I say this, which is that attribution is not meant from my perspective to lay claim. Sales and marketing is the go-to-market engine of any company. When
right,
I think about it as I'm always a football or sport analogy kind of person. We carry the first 80 yards, they carry the last 20. And that first 80 has to be defined effectively so that we know how the team is marching down the field, right? I also
right.
use that analogy when people say marketing, AI should take over marketing, or my favorite one of the last couple of months was the CFO should become the head of performance, chief performance officer, which I said, great. I say we all quit over here and let's see how that works out, right? It's because we can't define that first 80 yards. We can't defend it. We can't attribute it properly. We can't link all of that stuff together. And we're relying on intuition rather than data. So,
Yeah.
we have to stop. And if you haven't made, as a leader in marketing, if you haven't gone to your CEO and said, I will not sign up for these numbers until you give me a backbone so that I can actually run these numbers effectively and not go, the answer to the question today, I don't know how you answer it, Lisa, but the answer to the question today to how did last quarter's marketing investment perform is let me get back to you. And then you run
Yeah.
over to your marketing ops team and you have them run spreadsheets and this, that, and the other. And a month later, you come back with the data. That's just not going to work. And it's not only ineffective, but it's likely unreliable because everybody's crunching in different ways.
Yeah, 100%. I want a weekly view of that. And I want to be able to connect the dots for what is in marketing, what was expected to be in marketing, what was the expected. So I don't even want just actuals. I want the actuals compared to what I originally planned for and then what the forecast is indicating. So I almost want those three data points, right?
100%. It's scenario
Yeah,
testing,
so
right? When do we
yeah,
get beyond A/B testing? Which, by the way, everybody, you can tell that marketers are reaching for solutions when MMM RFPs are showing up with AFP A/B testing requirements. And the reason is because they're like, I want to be able to scenario plan. Well, guess what? A/B testing is a limited view of one micro part of what it is that we do. But scenario planning could be applied to events, right? You could say, I plan to go to this event. This is the last 3 years worth of data at that event. These are the 12 things we did. This is what we did in advance. This is what we budgeted. This is what it turned out. Imagine a world where you actually have that data at your fingertips and you're proving out the value. And you're giving yourself A, B, or C. What if I did a 20 by 20? What if I did a 40 by 60? What if I did a dinner before? What if I did, all these things? And you'll be allowed to model that inside a system of record that has the information from your previous events. And even eventually benchmarking against the vertical you're in, right? So we manage billions and billions of dollars under investment in this platform, and there will be benchmarking available. So, we've served financial institutions quite a bit because compliance is a huge part of what they have to do. How do you do compliance without data? I'm not sure, right? So they've latched onto this, and we'll be able to eventually say, Wells Fargo, this is how you line up against the rest of the banking institution in this area.
one of the most challenging engagements, adventures I had. I remember starting my second head of marketing position with this ask to go and reduce personnel spend by $5.6 million, but also the ask was if I'm going to scale account-based marketing, I needed to be able to take the money from the events that the company was obviously addicted to
Yeah.
historically. So simultaneously, I knew I was going to gut marketing. I also was going to upset a lot of people in sales by trying to wean them off this addiction. The very
Hmm.
first thing I asked for was, okay, all the marketers, uh, send me the budget. Send me how you've been spending it. Like I seriously got, I think it was 19 spreadsheets in
Yep.
7 different languages and currencies,
I,
none of them up to date. Here I
yep.
am, like 1 in the morning on a Saturday night, Googling each line item to figure out like, what did this person spend money on? Then I find out it's like uniform cleaning was a couple $100s a month. It was how were they managing? Uh, Candidly, a very large multi-million dollar budget, like
Hmm.
in spreadsheets like this, disjointed spreadsheets, much less figuring out connecting the dots between what they spent and the impact it had. Like it's physically impossible. How could you do
Yeah.
that? 19 spreadsheets, 7 different languages. Who was actually paying attention to the shop, much less
Hmm.
connecting the dots for how those things actually perform? The very first thing was I had to get out of the death by spreadsheets. I had to bring this view in, and I had to shine a spotlight on it. Like, this is how money is spent today. And then the second piece you learn through that effort is that you actually never really spend at the rate you've committed to spending. So there's a
Hmm.
reason why the pipeline and the revenue, the growth is slowed, because you've got investments that the organization was supposed to grow to accelerate the growth of that business not actually being spent because every one of these marketers were squirreling away money just in case. Like they were also and never actually spent it. Like so I had 19 spreadsheets, 7 different languages and currencies, lots of pockets of money that I couldn't figure out was it spent, was it not, was it spent when it was supposed to be spent, did it have an impact? I don't know. Marketers aren't helping themselves. If this is how
Yeah.
we're showing up, we're obviously
Well,
not managing the business.
I mean, to be fair, and I
Yeah.
started in PR, right? PR
Yeah.
is absolutely renowned for not being able to prove what it does, and yet everybody knows if you get the cover of the Wall Street Journal or something else that there's a huge lift for the company, but nobody can measure it, right? So you go to
Yeah.
kind of the standard people who measure PR, and they give you share of voice and impressions and completely weak data points that mean nothing as it relates to attribution. We recently worked with Tommy Hilfiger to prove F1 PR against revenue in that quarter. I mean, unheard of stuff.
That's amazing.
And that's the goal of trying to bring some of that modeling that kind of sits in the science project over to an intelligence layer on top of this backbone of now reconciled data. So you're valuing everything according to its time horizon, the impact that you expect to have at what time, and that
Right.
modeling now comes functionally aligned. So functionally aligned to events, functionally aligned to PR, and gives proper attribution. At the top, I said, we are also guilty of not defending every part of our function as marketers, and everybody's
Yeah.
had their heyday. In the 90s, it was write a press release every week because that's the way, PR is going to get you everywhere you need to go. Then we got
Yeah.
performance marketing, which was the first data that people could count. And every single time people treat that one thing as though it represents the whole, that in some way that one functional area is giving you everything you need to understand the effort, which is we all of us know that that is insane
You
and
need the
not
whole engine.
true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we never had a way other than our own instinct and intuition to be able to explain events or any of those types of things. The days where that, I mean, you were being a good business steward of the function of marketing, and that is the role of the CMO and in this new age. You have
Yeah.
to measure and quantify and value your effort like a business leader. And if you're not thinking about it that way, you're going to be incredibly behind.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% agree. I like to think about marketing like an ATM, where if you are caring for the collective engine or the collective business of marketing, you put money in, more money can be extracted out than what you put into it.
That's
I
right.
use the ATM to refer to 3 things and show the relationship: audience growth, So brand, PR, when you think about what's attracting new audiences to
Yeah.
you, trust and engagement. What are the things that you're doing to build trust and engagement that so you don't have to keep buying or
Yeah.
working so hard to attract more? And then your ability to monetize that trust and engagement. And if you can connect the dots across those investments, you recognize it's not one function that matters more than the other. It's actually the system. It's the engine that works together. And your ability to manage that engine in such a way that's optimized, that's what's going to drive or maximize its impact.
Yeah.
And your ability to connect the dots and share that with non-marketers of the world is what's going to prove its value as a
I,
function.
when I'm not using sports analogies, I use war analogies, which is probably not a great idea right now, given the situation of the world, but I'm going to use it anyway.
Yeah,
Landing a market is going to war. You're going to war to win the hearts and minds of a category and the folks who will buy in that market. And if I
yeah,
went to war, I would not go with just an infantry, or I would not go with just my Air Force or just the Navy. And so the
yeah,
ability to orchestrate that in a way that's effective is the instinct that marketers we have uniquely, leaders in marketing have uniquely. And thus far, we've been executing without getting reports back from the field. So we go, the war should look like this, and we think we're going to have these outcomes. And then we never get reports back. We don't see what's happening in the field, or we get dribs and drabs and we have to interpret that drib as something different. It's nonsense, right? It's absolute nonsense. And yet we've been functioning, as I said earlier, fairly legitimately and have been such good stewards, to your earlier point, that we actually don't spend the entire budget because we're afraid of going over. That's another problem, right? We should be spending as effectively as possible. Workday. I just described a pretty significant enterprise architecture, right? I'm talking about everything from budget to command center campaign views and the ability to manage those campaigns singularly, the ability to then see the intelligence coming back and the performance and then interpreting that live. That's a giant enterprise architecture. Um,
right.
Unsurprisingly, our large brands do not bite off the entire thing. They understand that, these are the elements that they need to step into. So they
Right.
usually attach budgets, and I think that's kind of where you started too, Lisa, was somewhere in the campaign budgeting area. So Workday had basically aligned the budget with the back office in finance. And because they were able to reconcile for the first time ever and prove the value of the effort that they had distributed, they were actually able to ask for more money last year in 2025, which was unheard of. And the CFO was happy to give it. So even as you're incrementally rolling this out and you're absorbing, kind of first plugging it into the back office and then extending the campaign functionality and finally the performance layer, you're going to get incremental credibility because we're so far behind at this point that even marginal steps in the right direction start to yield the results that you want to see.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, I always say, the how do you eat an elephant, right? This
Yes.
whole thing feels like a big old elephant sitting in front of us. Like the trick question is just one bite at a time, one
Yes.
bite at a
Yes.
time, and it doesn't need to be perfect either. Just directionally sound, one bite at a time, and just keep moving forward in a way that demonstrates that you're managing marketing like a business that's in service of the overarching business strategy goals. So, yeah,
Yeah,
totally
I
agree.
love it. One of the other things I just wanted to point out is our inability. So for brand experts, we're pretty poor at branding ourselves. We actually have an entire budget line item that's called non-working spend. Now, I don't know about you, Lisa, but if I'm a CFO and I'm looking at the marketing budget, the very first place I'm going to go after is non-working spend. And we need to be able to surface the value of things like design and brand and PR in a way that makes sense to people. I think it's just
Yeah,
crazy. Have
yeah.
you ever run into just even the lack of
Oh,
credibility on the way we position things?
well, I have noticed in a lot of the CMO communities in the last couple of months that the running theme has included the marketing of marketing. And what does that entail? The marketing of marketing within the organization for different stakeholders. Obviously, for CFO and our finance business partners, having something like that within our budget, they're
Yes.
smart enough to know what that bucket likely means. Or at least they have been trained in the past by other marketers about what that bucket could potentially mean. And that feels like it's open for cut, right?
Yes, 100%,
You
right?
have
We're
to
gonna
think
go
about the
somewhere. I'm cutting
stakeholders.
that.
Well, look, I think every one of the stakeholders in the business has been trained to believe something by a marketer somewhere in their career, right?
Yeah.
If a sales rep gets a bullshit junk lead from a marketer 15 years ago, believe it or not, they still have that same perception of whatever it is that you're asking them to pursue today, fair or not.
Fair
You have
enough.
inherited the good and bad behaviors of the marketers before you. Same thing
That's
with
right.
CFOs, same thing. Look, CIOs. I had a CIO, I remember starting one of my engagements, and the CIO opened his first conversation with me saying, my team hates your team. And I am not going to authorize you to buy any new technology because your team loves to buy new technologies and never actually use them. Super awesome because the two things I made promises during the interview required a different set of
Yeah.
technology than the ones they had. So then I had to figure out, like, I don't know how to turn this around, but I've inherited the relationship that they've been trained to believe about marketing from previous marketers. And now on the flip side, there have been some amazing marketers that I've succeeded,
Hmm.
and I've benefited from them. But look,
Yeah.
the
You,
reason
you
why some of these perceptions persist is they started somewhere.
Exactly. And we've got to do the work that we do best, which is to
Yeah.
shape minds and shape perceptions. The cobbler's children have no shoes, kids. We've
Yeah.
got to go and start framing up the
Yeah.
conversation in a way. I mean, who better? Right? We do it for a living. We should be doing it for ourselves. You keyed
I
off
agree.
a very interesting part, and this is the part of the conversation where I always feel like I should uh, uh, start saying sorry, start asking for forgiveness. I've been in enterprise software since the beginning of my career, so it's been
Yeah.
glaringly obvious to me that we have been put at a disadvantage, and there are myriad reasons why we ended up here. But the
Yeah.
reality of the CIO, the reason that there's a insanity going on over there is because the point solutions, the 15,000 of them, arrived before the enterprise platform. We are one of the only functions that happened to. Everybody else got an enterprise backbone first, and then point solutions that would augment the efficacy of that backbone came later. The standards
Yeah.
were there, the data was set, you were able to tap into something. Instead, and I think I forget who has the crazy eye chart when
Oh, yes. Chief Martech, Scott
yes, my
Brinker.
God, every
I
time
have
I
been
see it,
stalking that chart
it
for
is the
decades.
worst,
Well, it's
right?
been
But
like almost 2 decades now, right?
yeah,
With Chief
imagine
Martech.
you're the CIO and you're getting some variant, some flavor of that coming from the marketing. I would scream too. We don't even have just one. Some people have more than one marketing automation tool. They have more than one email tool, etc. So we have to stop. Everybody's responsibility. I don't think marketing leaders need to be systems integrators. In fact, I encourage you not to. And I'd love to talk about the build versus buy with you here for a second in a minute.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a systems integrator, but you do need to stop the insanity. You need to recognize that there is a level of insanity going on and start to look for the platform that will allow you to interpret all of those different data signals and hook in. Nobody's asking you to execute differently. Integrate with a system that will pull that data together and make sense of it for you, and then you'll be your CIO's champion. That's,
Yeah.
kind of the answer there. So build versus buy. What are your thoughts as it relates to getting to an architecture like that, Lisa?
Well, I have a couple thoughts on it. So I think build versus buy, this next phase of marketing leadership, and I can't say it in a better way than this. In the age of AI, we're at this moment where we've got to stop thinking that I need to uh, build everything or buy like I've got to get out of this
Own
business
everything. Yeah.
where own everything. So
Hmm.
that framework that I talk a lot about in my book is you have to make decisions in terms of what you really should own, what you should be outsourcing in that buy category, and then
Hmm.
what should be automated. Like have a
Yeah.
real clear strategy for that. In the context of tech, what's really scary is that we have this bloated tech stack that we've not invested in the integrations between them. We've
Yep.
not cared for how the data flows across it. The other kicker is that that budget that we have that we've been spending on tech rivals that of our CIOs.
Hmm.
And last year, we sponsored this research study by Avasant. And some of the questions we asked in this research study was, hey, as it relates to AI and the tooling, the licensing you've been investing in, where are you getting that money from? As
Mm.
we were trying to figure out, I'm like, something's happening. We're obviously increasing spend in AI, right? In tech. We haven't played whack-a-mole with the existing tech stack. We're not getting these dramatic increases in the marketing budget. I haven't seen anyone actually intentionally reducing their personnel spend. We're still addicted to events. Like, where is this coming from?
Yep.
Turns out that the overwhelming majority is near like 85% of the respondents to the survey said that they were funding their AI licensing from their program spend because it
Yeah.
was the one
Well,
flexible part of their collective budget. And they also didn't have a whole lot of faith that it was going to dramatically lift the productivity of the people.
yeah.
And they were contractually committed to this bloated tech stack. Like, all right, so not only have we got this bloated tech stack, we have AI everywhere. We're not getting any real lift. We can't tell the story. And we're taking it from the program spend, which means our ability to really influence the business results also is constrained. I mean, it's like a perfect storm. So
Yeah, I mean,
I've
you've
got
got
to
to
make
get
some
support.
decisions,
Yeah, you've
right?
got to get support. I mean, there's a significant part of what we do is also advise on kind of how to migrate into this new world. And I think
Right.
you're seeing that AI everywhere and nowhere and, like applied haphazardly. That isn't going to solve the problem. That's just adding to the problem, right? So
Yeah.
we have an agentic
Chaos.
strategy, and it's an agentic threat. That's the start strategy, which is designed to surface insights, apply models, and give you a data view into the efficacy of your effort. We're not going to build agents for every Tom, Dick, and Harry that plugs into our system, but we will empower them to build their own agents so that they can interface in that way. So if you're not familiar with enterprise architectures, and I'm not saying that you should buy an enterprise system or that SaaS is the way to go. That's not the conversation I'm having right now. Traditional layers of functional software support have traditional layers, and they'll have the same layers in AI. They're basically a data layer, an analytics layer, and an application layer. And then you plug into other applications. Those are the layers you have to think about your business in that way. Do I have a solid data layer? Am I applying? Does this partner of mine give me the analytics I need to be able to interpret that data in the way that I need to? Are there open APIs that will allow me to take the agents that I'm leveraging in this system and interplay with agents of another system? You've got to start thinking about it that way so that you can be critical enough to decide which moles to whack and which places to invest in and which partners to go with. And I can
Yeah.
promise you that the Accentures and KPMGs and Deloittes of the world aren't bringing you the solution that you need, right? So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, you're not going to partner with one of the big five and, they'll think their way out of into a solution with a deck that you get in 5 months. You need an actual and enterprise partner that's going to help you kind of distinguish what the right path is.
Yeah. And when you do make investments in technology, care for the adoption of it.
That's
So,
right.
many of these technologies that we have in our tech stacks, they are quite expensive. I mean, like there's an investment that you need to make. It can
Hmm.
have game-changing results and impact. But what's always shocking to us, and we see this across all of our clients in many ways, is that they don't necessarily either have the skill set or the capacity to get the full value out of that, who care for as much about the utilization and the
Yeah.
application of that technology as you did about buying it.
Yeah.
And that's a
If
critical
you,
piece.
my gate for you right now, and I'm a true enterprise girl, and I think, SaaS was software as a service. That's what it means. The intent of SaaS when we did it 20 some odd years ago was a different mechanism for delivery. What happened is the attributes of scale, so security, availability, reliability, all of a sudden became synonymous with enterprise value, and that is not true. Just
Yeah.
because a point solution can scale to the cloud and be available to you and accessible does not make it enterprise class. That means it doesn't solve your entire functional problem. So my gate is if you can buy software with a credit card, stop. Just stop doing it. Stop buying credit card based solutions and go and find real enterprise architecture that is going to buoy your effort. You're not going to get away with piecemealing, sewing together a bunch of disparate systems that were never created to work together.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And care for as much, after you get the keys to the car as you did when you were adding it to your tech stack, right?
That's
Get the
right.
really invest in making sure. Now, part of that conversation is how best to get the value out of it. And that's
Hmm.
why we are seeing these enterprise marketing organizations explode in terms of headcount because everything requires a specialist. I require a specialist in every channel where our buyers can be found. I require a specialist in every technology that we're using because there's so much complexity there. That sprawl happens in both ways, right? The tech and then the
Hmm.
people needed to get the value. If you're intentional about the design of your technology, the enabling platform that can help you manage this function like a business, you can then make decisions in terms of how best to get that work done in the
Yeah.
platform so you get the real value out of it. I think this is why we're now seeing the rise of, you mentioned software as a service. We're now seeing the rise of services as a platform or services as a software, where you're starting to, the rise of these organizations getting the real value out of the tech is the next, like, real growth lever.
So, if you could tell every CMO that's listening to this here today and that will listen when we post it, what to do differently starting this week, what would you recommend?
Well, just number one, just recognize that the operating model that we've been all operating with over the last that it no longer going to work. You
No.
could argue whether it worked effectively before, but just assume that your operating model needs to evolve from here. The very first thing is get visibility. Get visibility in terms of where your resources are being invested. And then the second piece is get visibility into how that work gets done. My favorite question to ask is something you can do today, something you can do this week is how long does it take to get from an idea or a market opportunity into market? How long does it take to get that comprehensive campaign into market? How
Mm,
many days?
mm,
And if you
yeah.
can answer that question, then you likely know why it takes that long. Then you can
Mm,
kind of go back and reevaluate how that happens, right? From
mm,
the idea through the planning through the execution deployment. If you don't know the answer, and most leaders don't,
yeah.
go and get the answer to that question, and dare I say, most people are horrified by that answer. And in
Oh,
AI,
yeah.
with AI native competitors now, if it's taking you months to get a true campaign out to market, something's broken. You could
Mm,
have seven handoffs. You could have three people from different functional groups that need to review and approve every asset before it gets out. But like, get that visibility. If you can answer that question, great. How can you make it better? How can you
mhm.
accelerate speed to market? How can you make sure that that campaign improves its impact? But that's my favorite. Like, get the
I love
visibility
that.
you need.
I love that. And I agree with you. Most people would not know the answer to that question. And it is alarming when you get the answer to that question and you can see it because you realize how much creep and bloat there actually is in something you probably considered a lot more streamlined.
Yeah.
My guidance would be to stand and defend. If you're being asked to do more with less, if you're being asked to deploy AI, you need to ask for the backbone that you need to be able to do that effectively. Because this knee-jerk reaction that we've been having to, I've got to do more with less, or I've got to deploy AI, I've got to scale my content, stop, think, and ask for the support that you need. Because if you don't now, especially the big global brands who are so complex and are working in different languages and different monetary systems and different campaign approaches, it's going to eat you alive. And
Yeah,
this function is worth protecting. We are the business execution arm of any brand out there. We all know it. And now it's time for everybody else to know. And you're going to get that credibility only if you are taking a sensible approach into this new world that we're going into. You can do more with less. You will deploy AI, but don't do it without considerate thinking and without a technology partner and an operational partner that can help frame the solution for you.
agreed.
Get back to the job of marketing and allow the experts in the fields of those areas to do that work for you.
Agreed.
Agree. Is there anything you want to say in closing, Lisa?
Well, one, thank you so much for the opportunity to have this conversation. I've been looking forward to it for some time. If anyone has any questions about some of the concepts we talked about, I can be found on LinkedIn, Lisa Cole 01. If you are in a situation where you are struggling with scaling, but you have limited resources, I work for 2X. Feel free to reach out to us there, www.2x.com. Um, anyways,
And
and
read The Limitless CMO.
I
It's an
feel like I
amazing
should show
book.
it. I mean, it's
Yeah, it's a
yeah, I don't
wonderful book.
know.
Yeah, lots of
And
great insight. Lisa, thank you so much for being with me today. I always enjoy talking to you. You're brilliant. Thank you for all your insight. And if anybody has any questions or you want any insight or understanding into Uptempo, want to figure out how you can start this journey for yourself, please reach out and let me know. Thanks, everyone.
thanks, everyone.